Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel If Stars Align. This is Carmina and today I have with me my colleague and friend Ganesh Jayakumar. You probably know him from other videos on Nicole's channel. He is a researcher involved with science and also of course a student of astrology and cards of the truth. And today we would like to discuss a very fascinating topic, one that I get asked by a lot. For instance, oh, I don't know my birth time, maybe it's like half an hour off, but can you predict the exact day I'm going to meet my spouse?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I thought we would have this important conversation about rectification today. Hi,
Yes.
Ganesh, nice to have you.
Hi, Carmina. Thanks for having me on your channel. Yeah, it's always good to chat with you. Most of the time we do that through emails, but today it's really nice to see you in person and also talk about astrology. Never-ending topic. I mean, that's
Yes,
really good.
it really
But
fun.
today's topic, what you've chosen, is a bit controversial. I would start by saying that, and it's also one of the topics where people get scammed quite a bit in astrology. That's the reason I say it's controversial.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, birth time rectification is needed when you do not know what the birth time is, and there are plenty of reasons for that. And I'm sure you have questions, and from there we can take it one by one.
Yes, I think
Okay.
we will start with the obvious one. Like, what do you think is the importance? How do you think the cusps are involved and the Vargas, the divisional charts?
Yeah, sure. Can I just share my screen because I have one
Please do.
picture to
Mm-hmm.
show. Uh, let's see. Yeah. So can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay,
I see there's
great.
an elephant in the background.
Sorry.
There's an elephant.
Yeah, there is an elephant in the background. Yes.
Ganesha.
Yeah. That's because I'm always doing astrology these days. So it's my Ketu on the background there. And then, so this was the reason I shared the screen, because here you see there is a table I have with respect to Vargas. And Vargas is very important in astrology. And not many astrologers know how to use the Vargas. And this is why predictions go wrong. Okay. And B.V. Raman and Dr. K.N. Rao from India, they were the first pioneers to, indicate and motivate people to use the Vargas, the divisional charts. So Vargas are basically like harmonic charts in astrology, and there are a lot of symbologies to a person's being and also the Varga. For example, we have Shodasha Kriyas in the Vedic system. So each person goes through a 16 phases in his life where 16 events become very important. And those are very closely related to how we define the Vargas. Okay. Same way we have the Kosha system in the body, and you can also connect the Koshas to the Vargas. So there is a lot of indications in that way. There is the elements. There are 5 elements which we use in the Vedic realm. You can connect the elements to the Vargas. So there is this level of importance, yet many astrologers ignore them. Many astrologers are not even aware of them. Even in this day and age where you can use computers to calculate the Vargas, you don't use them anymore. And they are still not aware of how to use them, or don't know how to even use it for prediction purposes. Okay. So this I would say I'm quite lucky, because early on I started to use them when I started my astrology practice. Of course, it was only limited to D9, D7, and D10. I didn't know so much when I was learning in 2006, 2007. But after when Ern started teaching the Vargas, then it became a day-to-day activity for me. Like almost every time I have to look at a Varga. Without looking at it, it was not easy to do any sort of prediction. Then the reason in ancient times they never used this Vargas was because those days we didn't have computers. You cannot calculate. Most of them, they were using hand-drawn charts. Even I can remember when I was growing up, when I was going to meet my parents or my grandparents in a village in India, still they were using hand-drawn charts. They have these calculations with epimorphs on a table, and they used to do hand-drawn calculations. So I was fascinated just how good they were. Even with those hand-drawn calculations, they could predict everything to the month or to the day sometimes. But Why do you need birth time rectification? Comes down to if you really need events to be timed to the day. Okay. So for example, the most complex of predictions happens when you have charts of twins. And any astrologer who has dealt with the charts of twins, they will know the importance of Varga charts. They will know the importance of cusps there. There are a lot of people who do not use cusps in astrology itself. They use this mid portion of Rashi or equal divisions. There are so many different systems of cusps. Of course, those are research centered things. At the same time, there are even tropical astrologers, for example, who don't use cusps. They use mid portions of the signs and things like that. That to me is not correct in many ways. I found it to not work very accurately. I've tried and tested. The reason is I always use a simple analogy for the cusp. Before I go into the depth of the Vargas, I want to bring up the cusp because those are the main reasons we go into the Vargas. The cusp, for example, you think of yourself standing in a field and there is a stretch, like an horizontal stretch of line. One end of the field, you have one corner and then the second corner. If you want to sow some seeds and you stand there in the left side corner and throw it, it's not going to fall everywhere in a distributed way, right? It's going to fall somewhere more closely to you, it will fall more, and then it will split a little bit farther away, little less seeds. Same way on the other pole, if you stand and throw, it's the same thing. But if you stand in the middle, like close exactly in the middle, and you throw the seeds, you can equally distribute it however you want. So this is how exactly you have to view the earth. And here, God is the person standing and throwing the seeds. And then we have, the North Pole and the South Pole, which is the other ends. And the ascendant rises in the east. And of course, depending on how close you are towards the poles, the cusps are going to change. Most of my readings are with clients in the North Pole here because I live in Sweden. And here, I get a lot of clients in Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and even a lot of people in very upper north of US, like Canada and North America, and those kind of places. So I did not have any luck using this other system where the cusp falls in the middle, and I had to deal with the cusps as unequal cusps basically. So that was one reason. And then of course, if you see in the Rashi chart itself, when the cusps are falling in different Rashis, or some cusps are in 2 or 3 cusps are in a single Rashi, then predictions become very difficult. And you don't know what is it that you're actually looking at. Are you looking at a Rashi? Are you looking at the cusp and those sort of things? But for this reason, the Vargas sort of help because it fine-tunes the prediction. Okay. To give an example, what it means. So I have this screen here, and you can see the division, what we call as D1, D2, D3 to D60 in the Sanskrit, in the simple names. And then we have the Sanskrit names for that: Rashi, Hora, Drekana, Chaturthamsha for D4, and then Shashtiyamsha until D60. Okay. Each of these Vargas, they can be associated with an area of life. I'm sure you know that, but maybe the audience, some of them, they don't know that. But this area of life, for example, Rashi is connected to the physical body, and then D30 chart is connected to the fatalities, accidents, death, those sort of things. And we also have divisions in degrees. So Rashi is 30 degrees, how we divide it. Navamsha, for example, which is the chart of marriage, commitments, and relationships, is divided by 3 1/3. Okay. And these divisions, however you place them, will also influence the lagna of the particular Varga chart. So for example, in the Rashi, approximately in 2 hours window, an ascendant changes. Okay. Well, if you see the Varga, which is Hora, and 20 to 90 minutes, the ascendant changes. But you see, the more subtle the degrees get, or the more finer the time gets, it's going to get even more tricky because just the D12 itself, which is a chart of parents, you have 3 to 3.5 minute difference, and it will entirely change your fate with parents and your ancestors. So say even twins, they're not actually born in 5 minute or 10 minute difference. Sometimes it can be 15-20 minutes difference.
Yes.
Most of my life I've been sorry.
Even 1 minute makes a difference.
Exactly, even 1 minute. But I've had the luck to be associated with some sort of twins always wherever I've been, because I have a prominent Gemini in my chart, and I have friends who have been born 20 minutes in difference. I have friends who have been born 2-3 minutes in difference. And even there have been twins like male and female, and that's another interesting combination. So an astrologer who deals with such charts, he will know the importance of Vargas and also the cusps. Okay, and predicting anything with the twins is so tricky, and it's like the most toughest predictions can come because of that. The careers, even though they are so similar, the careers will be completely different, whatever the twins do most of the time. One is maybe an actor, the other guy can be an accountant somewhere. So this sort of
and even the relationships, I had one who was married and one who couldn't get married.
Exactly. And then relationship with the parents itself change a lot. I had one really interesting client from USA where twins were daughters. She had two daughters, and then one daughter is a very nice person. She really understands and be very close to the mother, but the other daughter is a bit of a rebel. Okay, she doesn't go well, and she doesn't understand. She's not following the orders of the mother or listening to her parents' advice, those sort of things. So then in the chart of twins, you don't do anything but start your reading directly from the D60. That's where you have to start. And now you're talking about D60, which changes 3 to 3.5 minutes. The Lagna changes 3 to 3.5 minutes. But the cusps can change in 40 to 45 seconds. So that 40 to 45 seconds of inaccuracy will give a different line of prediction itself for them. This is the reason we are looking at Vargas, and this is the reason we need a birth time rectification. And also, to predict sensitive events of life, like death, for example, or if say a person is already ill and you want to see when they will recover, you will have to know the sensitive time in the sixth cusp in the D60, for example, or the sixth cusp in the D30. Just the D30 itself changes 6.5 to 7.5 minutes. If you want to make pretty accurate predictions, I would say you have to have at least until the D30 right, because D30 is like a midpoint between D1 to D60. If you have something right until D30, you can be confident with your predictions. Otherwise, it can get really challenging, and the only reason people lose interest in astrology is because an astrologer goofs up and makes dumb predictions, and they don't believe in astrology anymore, or they're just jumping clients like a 3 of hearts, basically, from the cards point of view, like a bee going from one astrologer to another. So you don't want they're trying to go through that phase. You want them to feel confident with astrology. And actually, it's very philosophical also in many ways. If you make predictions to the day of an event, not only on your chart, on other people's chart, you can influence them in a nicer way to make them attempt changes in their life. Okay, say for example, a client comes to you and they want to know about marriage and relationships. You make the predictions, they're happy. So that means that they have confidence in you as an astrologer. Okay, so there is also some challenging aspects in their chart, and maybe they have not been listening to anyone's advice in life. But then if you make that prediction and also give that sound advice to them, they will take that advice and run with it. That's the goal of astrology, at least. You should implement and adapt to the changes of the chart. Mm-hmm. So as an astrologer, making predictions is extremely important. And if you want to be a good astrologer, you better use the Vargas, and you better use the cusps, and also know how to do birth time rectification, because it will make you give accurate predictions for your clients. This is just the introduction to birth time rectification. Okay.
Yes. Do you think there are ways like Prashna or like card spreads that can help people without rectification?
That's a good question. The thing is, in Prashna, what we are doing basically is we are casting a chart for the moment. Okay. And it's basically like a birth chart for the moment, right? You cast it and you know what is happening. So this is a very interesting question you ask, because I do get many clients that book readings with me and they want to know in the Prashna, will I get married? Okay. And then I do the reading for them, and if it's mostly not positive, then they get disheartened. But that's not actually accurate, because you know why? Prashna is only limited for this window of time. 3 months, 6 months, and 1 year. I normally, when I do the Rajika Prashna, I use it for 6 months to 1 year. Depending on how I think that time, I use it that way. But the cards, when I'm casting, most of the time it's only for 3 months window. So if I, as an astrologer, tell them you will never get married, I'm the most dumbest guy on earth. That's because really, think about it. It's like if they don't get married in the next 3 months or 1 year, that doesn't mean they will never get married for the entirety of their life.
True. That's what I do.
Yeah.
I always, like, after a Prashna or a card spread, I also check with the chart to see what.
Exactly. So that's one thing which you have to keep in mind. This is a sensitive topic because there is. I was going to tell this when I go into the examples, but you can already bring this up. There is two things in astrology, and this also many astrologers miss, and that's why I never like anyone who gives out generic predictions, standing there wearing the mask of Rahu or looking like the sun, or predicting this year you'll have that and this and the other thing. I really don't like that because that again is pushing away clients away from you than attracting them. Maybe for the moment you'll attract them and you can give a reading for them, and you're also promoting your work. But generic predictions will also make them very excited or very depressed. Okay, so same thing with astrology here. If you do not know how to look into the chart and say what is the static promise in the chart and what is the dynamic thing. When I say static promise, the best I can give this with an example. Take an example of a cow that is chained and is tied to some pole or something. Okay, we human beings are just like that. We are tied to our destiny, that is the pole. And within that pole, the length of the thread, the cow can rotate, it can move around, and it can go left and right, whatever it can do. Okay, if you cannot go anywhere above that thread. That is the limit that destiny has set for you, the pole, and it is fixed there. So that is the static promise in the chart. The dynamic promise is to predict, okay, will the cow move left now or will the cow move right? That's how you use the dynamic promise. And dynamic promise comes down to timing, and there's plenty of things there, which is the Dashas, Jaimini astrology, the cards, Tajika Prashna, yearly Varshafala. Use whatever you want. And you can use Nadi astrology. Those are all dynamic things. But where people fail to see is the static promise. If you do not know what is the limit of this chart, what is the promise of this chart, then you already are set yourself for making a wrong prediction. That's the most important thing. So when you ask that question about whether other systems of astrology can be used, if you do not know the birth time, I can guarantee you that I will do a better reading with the D1 chart without a birth time itself. To explain the psychology of the person, I don't need any time. I just need the day of their birth, and I can deliver a much better reading for them than most of the astrologers out there. It's no problem for me. But the problem is when you're asking me to predict something, I have to be very careful here. I cannot determine your marriage unless I know where the Upapada falls in Jaimini, or unless I know where the seventh cusp is. Is seventh lord debilitated in the seventh house in the D9 or D7 chart? So you want to be careful with those sort of sensitive predictions. And then just looking at one planet and saying that, oh, Venus is exalted, so you will definitely get married. No, maybe not, because if there is a debilitated planet in the seventh house or the Dharakaraka is debilitated, it makes it equally tough to get married. So these sort of things. But having said that, it's not so bad using other systems like cards of truth, for example, you can use, because you still have birth card, and the birth card only changes if you're born before sunrise or after sunrise. You can use that to give at least an overview of their life. What is it that you're going towards? What kind of things you can get? And then, of course, you have the manual tarot card spread you can do yourself and give a horoscope reading. For instance, I do that. And then you can also use Prashna, which you showed, and that is another interesting way to do it. But I never conclude any reading without looking at the birth chart. I use many systems of astrology to have confluence, and I prefer to do that way, even though it takes longer, because I want to be sure what is happening with the chart, and I really like to look at the chart always. No, that's one way. Yeah.
Yes, that's why parents call us crazy astrologers.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so you were mentioning the dashas, and I saw that at some point on the forum you said you could predict something to the day just using Vimshotri dasha. I guess
yes.
You have like a pretty accurate birth time, right?
Yeah. You need a pretty accurate birth time. But if you the thing with dashas is also very interesting. You see, Vimshottari is a system relies heavily on the moon and the moon's nakshatra. That's where basically it starts. Moon is always fickle-minded. You know, if you see in the sky, it goes from new moon to full moon, like with so many changes in phases. So that's how Vimshottari is very sensitive to time, and you know, it's really sensitive in many ways. But Jaimini Dasha, for example, is sun-based system, and you can use that. It's more consistent, like the sun. Whether you are there, I'm not, I'm there, or nobody else is there tomorrow, the sun will still show up. That is something that has been always there. So, with that, in conjunction with Vimshottari, you can really do a good, accurate prediction using just the dasha. Say you did not know any system of astrology, and you only knew the dashas. You better use both those things together. Okay, then if you sometimes, you know, it's very interesting that you are lucky and there is a straightforward dasha. You can just see the dasha and say, yes, you will get married in this time. In just 2 months window, you can give them. Sure, it will happen. But you know, I will show at some point some examples, and also maybe later this year I was planning to teach some courses how, if you are a good astrologer, from every point of view, if you look at it, Vimshottari will line up in some levels anyway. Okay, the Dasha Lord may not change so much, but the Bhukti Lord will have an agenda for marriage. He will also have an agenda for divorce, and he will have an agenda for children. So these sort of things will line up. Which are you going to predict? Then it comes down to getting confluence for other systems of astrology. So yeah, you can use the dashas, but I use it more like a broad method to verify the rectification. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, also the cards, I think they're a good method too.
Good method, exactly. Cards, I use it more like a broad method for getting the lagna right, or also getting the other features of the person right, like the career, for example, if it makes sense. Not always it will line up the cards, but cards I use to verify the rectified birth time. What I mean by that is, say you came to me for a reading and you knew your birth time was between what is the time now, 15:37, or later on until 4 o'clock in the evening. Let's say it was like that, 3:30 to 4 o'clock. I rectified your birth time and I found it to be 3:50, let's say 3:50 something. So then I go into the events of the day, all the list of events you would have given me, and cross-check that 3:52 birth time with the cards. So then maybe some window is there, or that week progression, or that year progression, where I see, oh yeah, this year she gets the seventh cusp in this card, and this is the year she met her spouse. So now I can be sure the seventh cusp is right because the cards are lining up also. So to fine tune, I use the cards in this way. But for broad activation, I can discuss some examples when we go into the reading. Is I use more like just to find the card perfectly right. What I mean by that is, say a client came to you for a reading. They never knew their birth time whatsoever, and just they knew they were born in this time of the day. Sometimes, let's say they are born between sunrise and sunset. Okay, more tricky now. You don't know which card it is going to be. Like, say if there was a 5 of spade and a 4 of spade. Now you have to decide which is the birth time, and then you can use the cards for this purpose. So how I do that? For example, take 5 of spade as one of the first step of doing it. It's very mathematical, birth time rectification. It's like, you know, you do a lot of iterations, a lot of runs, and that's how we arrive at the conclusion with birth time rectification. So for example, I assume their birth card is a 5 of spade in the beginning, and then I go through the spread. Say their Mercury card was holding the third cusp, and their Mercury card was a 9 of hearts, for example. Okay, I'm not saying this exists in real card spread. Just don't go look at that. But just give for an example's sake. If there is a 5 of spade and a 9 of hearts on Mercury, so I've collected a lot of events from the person, and one of them is birth of their sibling. Okay, and for coincidence sake, let's say the sibling also is ruled by Mercury, because Mercury is the Bhatrikaraka in the chart. Okay, now this person who has come to me for the rectification knows their sister or their sibling's birth time perfectly well. I take that chart, I plug it in, and if I see that the 9 of hearts is their birth card, then I know this person is a 5 of spade. Why do I say that? Because the 5 of spade as 9 of Hearts on Mercury, and Mercury card is holding the third cusp, which shows the sibling. And now I know the birth card has a very strong influence with the 9 of Hearts, and then you have a broad window. So for sure, this person is not born before sunrise. You can be now sure that they are a 5 of Spade person. So you narrowed down the window from 12 hours to 6 hours, let's say.
Yes.
So this is one way to rectify with the cards. Yeah.
I love to use the charakarakas with the cards, like, oh,
yeah.
you're gonna
Yeah, exactly. The charakarakas are very important with the cards, and I've also requested Hans to add the charakarakas in the card screen so that you don't have to look somewhere else for that. It's very useful, actually. That's Gemini astrology and the cards. If you combine both of them, you can do really fantastic predictions to very high accuracy, actually.
Okay. You were mentioning the lagna, something about the lagna, and I'm curious, like, when you see the person's appearance, you also check the D30 or just the Rashi, or how do you go about it, like finding the ascendant?
That's a good question. Again, you can use this. This is another technique which you use for broad activation. What I mean by that is, say a person comes to you and they say, my birth time is 3-hour window. So now you're stuck between two lagnas. I will show some examples later and people can follow, but for theoretical purposes, say between Libra and Scorpio is the lagna, okay? And this person has actually a medium build, okay? Not a strong build, medium build. And Scorpio, for example, was holding Saturn. This is actually an example I'm going to show today, but Scorpio, for example, was holding Saturn. And now you can be sure that Libra is probably the lagna. Mm-hmm. Why do I say that? Because Libra lagna people, they do have a medium build. Mm-hmm. If Saturn was in Libra, they can be tall normally. Otherwise, it never happens that way. So now Scorpio is ruled out because the person is not so tall. And again, this you have to take it very relatively. In their family of like 4 people or 5 people, if they are the tallest, you can still tell Saturn has some influence on them. Yes. Okay. But to confirm this, now you go to the D30 chart, and now you have to rectify the chart to the level of D30 and confirm the same with the D30. So you don't want Saturn to rise or Saturn signs to rise in the D30, or you don't want planet like a Mars to be on the lagna, because Mars also makes someone a large build person. So that you get an idea of what signs can rise in the D30. Okay. Of course, this still is a broad window. You've not rectified the D30 whatsoever, but now you are at least sure that the person is no longer a Scorpio lagna, it's still a Libra lagna. This is how I use it. But to fine tune the real close degrees of the lagna and the divisional charts, you want to use transits, you want to use other systems of astrology. Okay. Yeah.
What about the people who say, okay, I have this written on the birth certificate, like it must be true? Do you still need to rectify that?
No, actually, that's very close enough. Like I would say, their accuracy is 8 out of 10 in that case. They don't have to rectify unless and until they really want to get events to the date. Because say, for example, they want a career prediction, they come to you and you're not sure whether the 10th cusp falls in Aquarius in the D60 or 10th cusp falls in, let's say, Pisces in the D60, then it becomes a bit of a challenge because you don't know whether Saturn is the planet that is going to give the career when he is in transit, or is it Jupiter? And now these 2 planets are very slow-moving planets in astrology. One takes 2.5 years to move a sign, and then the other takes 1 year. So how are you going to predict the career now? Are you going to say you'll get a job within 2.5 years, or will you get a job this year? So based on the transit of these 2 planets. So for this very reason, if you're really looking for something very accurate, I would say you need the rectified D60. Otherwise, if you're just looking for basic predictions and you say, if I'm happy to get a window time like 6 months, still I'm happy with my predictions, then you don't really have to go for it, like accurate D60 rectification. Okay?
So how long does it usually take you to do rectification?
Oh my God, this is actually a very interesting question, because in my current skill set, the most challenging as well as the longest window of rectification I've done is 12 to 15 hour window. So the person did not even know where they were born, what time they were born. They knew where they were born, and the day they were born, they even moved a country. So they were born in a Southeast Asian country, they actually were, there was war in the country that time. Their survival was under question, so they had to move the country to survive on the day of their birth itself. So there itself you have a clue. There itself you have what is it that you want to look for in the chart. So this chart actually took me about 20 to 30 days to rectify. I'm not saying continuously I worked 30 days. I worked only a few hours a day, like 2-3 hours. And the events they gave me was very little, because this person is not into astrology. They did not know what events to keep track of or anything. So I had to sit down, talk to them. I had to get every nitty detail from their life, you know. And yeah, it was extremely challenging. And in the end, I was so happy because I got the Lagna right. And the only way I could confirm that was, this is something which we will talk towards the end. The only way I confirm that is by making predictions for them. I said, now I have something which I'm confident with. I'm going to predict these things for you in the future. Let's see if this lines up. If this lines up, then I'm sure I have the perfect birth time. Otherwise, we have to really work again. So that was the most challenging thing. And the other thing with rectification is you can sometimes be very lucky. There will be some events that will just give you this flash of insight, and you can be said, this is it, and I know this is the birth time. Okay, based on some specific events which you are really good at using, that insight or that intuition will guide you for that.
So although you have the logic and all that, you still have to listen to the intuition.
Yeah, exactly. You still have to listen to the intuition. Very recently, I had a client who, by mistake, gave me the wrong year of birth for her sister. Okay. Then I'd worked few hours on the chart, and then I'd rectified the chart, and the birth of the sister was not lining up with that chart. So I had one time which all the events she had supplied was pretty much lining up, and then I had this birth of the sister event was not lining up with that. So I was really confused. I was pulling my hair and I said, what's happening here? Everything is lining up. Why is this not happening? Then I told this to her. I spoke to her and I told this to her. This event is not lining up. I'm not confident. And you know what she said after a few hours of thinking? She said, I'm so sorry I gave you the year wrong. So the transit was completely wrong, and it was not helping me in the rectification. So I could trust my instinct. Yeah, exactly. And the time I gave her was the first time which I felt all the events were lining up. So that's how you want to find confidence in your predictions. But then the reason here to go for rectification is, like, depending on the hours of difference there is, it will require a certain amount of work. So for example, if the birth time is only off by 10 minutes, it may not take so much amount of work. You still need the same amount of events to rectify the chart, but it will not take so much of effort because most of the cusps are at least fine. Just some fine tuning is needed. But when we're talking about 10 to 12 hours, or we're talking about a 10-hour window, then it really is a daunting task. And I always tell people that rectification is like a professorship in astrology. Okay, you have to be that skilled. You have to know all the techniques. You have to know everything to get to rectification, because you can literally use all the knowledge of astrology you have for rectification. Not many people know how to use that, but you can do that. And as an astrologer, for example, you evolve in this field, right? You start as a novice student, you're just learning, and then you're confident to study your own chart. That is like a student level. And then you get to the bachelor's level, where you can maybe, understand the psychology of the person, make predictions for them. Still static promise, not anything predictive. Then to the master's level, you are predicting something really good and you're happy with your work, that sort of a thing. You get to the PhD, then you are skilled in most of the systems, and then you are making some unique contributions yourself in this field. When you get to the level of professors, you want to use all the knowledge to teach or to make use of it for rectification in this way. So rectification is not an easy, it's very high level actually. Rectification is not an easy task, and it is very time consuming. Even from a monetary standpoint of view, it's not good for an astrologer, to be honest with you, because
it takes too long.
It takes too long. I can do 10 readings and make more money than doing one rectification. And for me, these days, I don't even prepare for a reading because I'm really so confident when I go in. I just start the reading right away. Rectification is like you sit there for hours to hours together, and you're crunching, and you're looking at D60, D45. you're repeating iterations. Like I remember my schooling days and my engineering days where we had to figure out something, and you start with an assumption to get to something else. You have to do many iterations. You get there exactly like that. And if you do not have a good Mercury, forget doing rectification. It's next to impossible, actually. It's very challenging. It's as much as fun it can be. It is not easy, but you learn a lot. That's one thing. You learn a lot with rectification, because just observing the events the client has given to you, you become a better astrologer. Just plugging it in, seeing why did this Dasha give this event? Why did this transit give this event? And what was lining up? Why did this particular card give this event? So if you just look at those events, you study a lot. You don't need to take any classes. If you are able to predict the events of your own chart, or you can learn from the events a client supplies you, you're more than good as an astrologer. If that is like self-study, self-learning. And that's how I became a better astrologer. With rectification is when I found confidence in my skill. And again, you see, Mercury rules skills, and Mercury rules this iterative process, digging in, researching, changing, looking left and right, and not getting confused. If you especially have people who have Saturn in the signs of Mercury, and negative avastas in the signs of Mercury, let's say a starved avasta of planets in the signs of Mercury, it's going to be challenging to do rectification. At the same time, you don't want to personalize something. A lot of people, even the clients themselves, they personalize their astrology, which is pretty bad. For example, you have a client who thinks that she's a Scorpio. No matter what you tell her, she's not going to listen to you. So when moon influences Mercury, this is what happens. You don't want yourself to personalize in that extent. You should be open to another things. And there is some interesting examples I will show you, and you'll see why that matters in rectification. Then the other thing with this is you require a lot of patience. Rectification, which is Saturn, you have to be very hardworking. It will take many hours. You need a lot of focus, which is Mars. And the end of the day, you need a good sun also, because you want to be confident with what you predicted. Yes. So you better rely on these kind of planets. Of all the planets, I think having Rahu or Ketu in the sign of Mercury is pretty good in this case, if Mercury is well situated. And I've seen that because the astrologers who have this kind of placement, they tend to be very detail centered. Yeah, you have it. I know I have it. Even Ernst has it. A lot of astrologers, they tend to be detail centered. Rectification is where you want to be detail centered. You don't want to be superficial. The reason rectifications go bad is because a person is superficial in terms of their knowledge also, and in terms of how they are attempting to resolve the time, So you want to be detailed. You want to use everything you have to rectify. So you better find an astrologer who is that good to rectify your chart if you have that kind of window. And you also better find someone who has the time and patience to do it. And it's not easy. For example, I can tell you, Zumrat, she's a friend in the forum. She wanted me to rectify her chart. She gave me the chart in July, and I didn't have the time to rectify at all. And unfortunately, I said, you have to be a little bit patient with me, and I will get back to you. I'm still working on a chart now, because now I'm free, and these months have not been free. But she was patient enough to see that. And any client who comes to me for rectification, I tell them to be patient, because I will not put a chart down unless I'm confident. And I do many levels of verification to say I'm confident. So it takes time, and it requires patience from both sides. So you have to be, good with that also. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was like something that I wanted from Ernst. I mean, in the beginning when I met him and I started learning for him, I asked, can you rectify my birth chart? And he's like, I don't have time. Then I'm like, okay, I'm going to learn.
Exactly. And Ernst has only taught a bit of the techniques to use for rectification. And I will show some other ways to use some of the techniques for rectification, which I've learned myself, that we will see. And that is still, I don't see as the end-all techniques. You need more knowledge to use for rectification. You can use everything, literally, what you know to rectify. Just that you have to be logical when you implement that. So
this leads us to the next questions, like how many events do you need in average?
It's a very good question. Actually, it's also good that I have the screen open here. You see in the D1 chart, the Rashi chart, Rashi is for everything. Okay, so you need an event for the lagna, then you need an event for the second house and all of that. So technically, if you really want a perfect rectification, I would say 2 to 3 events per house, per house or per varga. Okay, so for example, Hora is for monetary things. So if you got an award, for example, you had someone give you money, those events will be useful. And again, there is 2 levels of rectification, as I was talking about. A broad window where some events, some attributes of your life is useful to rectify. But when you want fine-tuned charts, you want events to the day of the event. So what we are doing with rectification is basically we are reverse engineering the chart. And when I say engineering, you already know that it's Mars rule thing. You want to be very logical. You want to go back and look what is happening. So you get a time of the event that the person has experienced something. Say in the D2, a person comes to you, they say, this day I got a healthy sum of money from my mother as a gift. And now you know you're looking for transits related to D2, you're looking for transits related to the moon, and then Jupiter because he's the Karaka for money. If it's a huge amount of money, sometimes even the D4 can get activated because it's a fortune, a bigger fortune. So then you're looking for Mercury. This much skeletal sketch you already have in your mind. Like an artist who is going into painting, he knows what he wants to paint, he is getting in the business next. So you have the event to the date, then you just check. Let's say the person had the second cusp in some sign of Taurus, for example, and Jupiter was in Scorpio, exactly opposing the second cusp on that day. And now you can be sure, yeah, the second cusp is lining up. So closely, the D1 and D2 is somewhat connected now. You just find out the second cusp in the D2, see if that makes sense in transit, and then finally check the D60. Of course, this when I'm talking now will not make much sense to the audience, but I will show some examples and they can understand that time. Yeah. So that's one way. And then the important thing is, like for example, the third house can show skills. A day when a person started the new skill, or third house can show short distance travel, that is useful for rectification. And then third house can also show a time when they got an award, for example, for their sports, those sort of things. Then fourth house, really useful for rectification. You can use it like for any luxurious item that you got. It can be an art item that you bought, a painting, for example, that you bought, or you bought a fridge for your house. Those are all fourth house related things. It's very useful. It's not, people think it's an unnecessary event in their life, but how many of you can buy a fridge every day? Or how many of you can buy a television set every day? No, you can't. It's an important, unique event. Then fourth house is vehicles, very useful when you bought a vehicle. What kind of vehicle you bought is also useful. The color of the vehicle, was it a luxury vehicle? Was it a second, like an leased vehicle, second-hand vehicle, those sort of things. And then fourth house is property. Fantastic event for rectification. You always get the D4 right with that sort of events. Then fifth house, you can use for any inspired project that you started, or progeny, which is having a child. And I always like to look at the fifth house. And then seventh house, of course, the relationship meetings, foreign travels, those sort of things are very useful. Business, starting of a business, those things. Then you see each house, you can use 2-3 events. One I was talking about foreign travel, one I'm talking about business for the seventh house, and then another event of relationship. So now I use 3 different events and still use the same cusp to rectify. So if all those events are given by the same cusp, but a different karaka, which is, say, for example, Venus gives a relationship event, Mercury gives a business event. Okay. Then a foreign travel event is given more by Rahu or the Lagna Lord or the 7th Lord. So this is how we separate the houses, and we separate the cusp and the karakas. That's why we need to be very detailed here. Okay. So yeah, we can use all the events from every house, and the more the unique event it is, and more number of events, the better the rectification, the more accuracy it will be. And in astrology, everything has to line up. That is when you have the right ayanamsha, or also that is when you have the right chart. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. Okay, if you have the right kind of birth chart, after rectification, events have to line up in the Varshafala as well. Events have to line up in the cards as well. Okay, and if you miss any cusp correctly, or if the lagna is changing somewhere, then the Varsha Phala will not line up. So you will not be able to see the same event using a Varsha Phala technique, for example. So very useful to have many events and to fine tune them. Again, you can use the attributes of the parents, attributes of their siblings, attributes of their wife, all of this also for rectification. The reason is there will be some similarities between that person and the people in their life. Okay, you can also use the profession of the parent, profession of the mother, profession of the sibling, and profession of the wife.
Events or like things about their siblings as well too.
Exactly, things about their siblings. Say, for example, the sibling is prone to accidents quite a lot.
Yes.
And then without rectification, the chart shows a perfect Mars. But suddenly you rectify the chart in 1 hour window and Rahu now moves into the same position as Mars in the D3. Then you know, okay, this person is more prone to accidents. And that makes sense because Mars is with Rahu. Okay, you can use that in the D3 and you can get a confluence. So you literally can use everything. It just comes down to how patient you are as an astrologer to rectify and how many events the client can supply you. Okay,
so 24 if they give you two for
an hour is always good. Yes. And if I get the other attributes, which is parents' birth time, siblings' birth time, profession, and all of that, it's really useful to have a confidence with the rectification.
Yes. So what do you think, like, overall would be the most challenging part of rectification? The time, like the lack of events, or what is the most challenging?
The lack of events is the most challenging. At the end of the day, you can be sure. For example, let's say a person will at least know their profession. Okay.
Yes.
Even if they don't know anything, they will know their profession. So based on just the profession, I can get an approximate lagna. I can get an approximate time for them. Okay. But I'm not confident as an astrologer, and they may pay me quite a lot of money to get this rectified, and then ask me also to predict the future events. But then what am I doing? Because I don't know whether this is the right chart or not. And if I make a prediction, if it goes wrong, they will be disappointed, and I will also be disappointed with my work. What am I doing? Am I not doing this correctly? And those sort of things. So lack of events is a challenge. And time, I would say, is more like a personal thing. Are you really it's up to you. Like in Sri Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, there is two ways to see anything in life. Anything that comes to you, there will be one is Shreyas and the other is Prayas. Shreyas is what is good for you in the long run. Prayas is what you love very, very much. Okay. Doing 10 readings and making money, financially being stable is a Prayas thing for me, because you are stable and you get the money and you are also helping clients. Shreyas is you become a better astrologer by doing rectifications, and you learn something new every day by doing rectification. That will help me in the long run, because I become better, then I can help the client even better in the future. Actually, don't think of rectification as something that is tiring, that you don't learn anything. Okay, there are so many ways an event can get triggered. And rectification, by learning rectification, you'll see that many permutations and combinations. And this will be stored in your system and in your brain somewhere when you're rectifying the chart, right? And in the future, when you look at some other person's chart, some other client's chart or anything else, and they're expecting a similar prediction, like they ask you, when is the marriage going to be? And you see a similar thing line up, for example, then that intuition will guide you. Oh yeah, this I've seen in another client's chart. And this day they got married because something else was lining up like this. And boom, you can predict like that. So this is how skills and intuition, both the Hierophant and the High Priestess work, in tandem. So you have to use this in your favor. Again, like I said, it's up to you whether you want to hone your skills, whether you want to become a person better at astrology, do more rectifications, you learn that, or you want to become an astrologer who is more of a counseling-centered person, do more readings, then you also are benefiting through that.
Do you think there is like a karma? Because I get some of my colleagues say, oh my God, I only get rectifications. Do you have a karma with rectifications or something?
As an astrologer, I've done all kinds of reading, actually. Equally, I would say, get all kinds of readings, not something more or less. These days, I get more of rectification readings because I think not many astrologers are doing rectifications. Like I said, it's because of the time limits there. And also, to be pretty honest with you in terms of its karma or anything like that, again, these people who come to me for rectification, unfortunately, have been with many other astrologers. Okay, like 3, 4 astrologers have already rectified their charts.
That's what I was
And
going to ask. What if you get a rectification from several people with several?
I'm going to address that. They've already exactly the very reason they've come to me means that something they predicted did not go well, right? That's a logical thing. So they have already been to many astrologers. They've given different times of rectification for them, and they're not happy with it because some of the predictions they made is not correct. So next thing, my job is now I have more responsibility on me because I have to now predict not only the rectified time, but also have to make the predictions correct. So this is what happens. And just recently, I mean, last week I was rectifying 3 or 4 charts, and all of them have been to 3 or 4 astrologers. Okay, and the funny part is this: some of the most illogical things I've heard from them that the astrologer has told the client makes me laugh, or I don't know whether I should cry. The reason is, like they know themselves that the window of time cannot be 10 minutes off. Okay, and this astrologer goes there and gives him 30 minutes or 40 minutes off. I had one client who came to me from India, and the astrologer had rectified his chart to 1.5 hours of time based on just pure Vimshotri system. And I was blown away. I was literally blown away. How did this guy, the person says, I'm born in this window, and he's giving him 1.5 hours of difference of time and just using one system. And I said, okay, I got the reading from him. And it was a very tough reading because it was a do or die situation in terms of marriage. And he came to me for a relationship reading, and he said, I want to know whether the marriage will sustain or not. Okay, now I'm in a tough spot because I want to predict a divorce or whether the marriage will sustain. Then again, the 10th cusp and the Upapada and all of that becomes very important from a Jaimini astrology point of view. So I rectified and I got all the things for him, and it was just off by some 8.5 minutes or something like that. I don't recall, it was a few years ago I did that. And he got the prediction. He was pretty happy. I also gave him the remedies, what he had to do to, get the marriage going and what kind of attitude changes he had to make. And that helped him in many ways. Okay. Then I had also a client from Brazil who was not sure about her time. Okay. Like she had 2-hour window, and she came to me. She said, I don't know. One astrologer says it's 30 minutes off. The other says it's 1.5 hours off. I'm totally confused. And I said, sometimes I feel very bad for such people because they've already spent a lot of money on different astrologers and readings. And then I said, okay, do one thing. You only book the reading with me. I got that reading done. And I said, I will make the prediction. Okay. If I make the prediction, and I will not tell you which lagna or what I'm giving you, I make the prediction. And then you come back to me if the prediction happens or not. Just recently, I made the prediction about a relationship meeting 2 years ago, actually. And that was predicted for September 2017. I was very stressed because I was working on my thesis and all of that. And she writes an email, Ganesh, you literally predicted the event to the date. And I met this person. I'm going to get a relationship compatibility reading with you. So I told her, thank you so much for letting me know. I'm not excited that the prediction came true. I'm more excited because the rectified birth time is correct now. That shows you are a Gemini Lagna, not something else.
Verification, the prediction coming true.
Exactly, the prediction come true. And then you can literally use even your own chart for rectifying the client's chart. That's another way of doing it. Okay, say for example, you have a certain birth card and you have certain spreads in your like life's chart and everything. And many times I've seen, and even I've shown it on Nicole's channel, is you'll see a lot of clients come to you in a particular window. Okay, like for example, now I'm in a King of Diamond window. Today is a King of Diamond day, and you see we are doing the reading. This sort of an interview, and King of Diamond is all about sharing the skills and being a master in his skills. So if a client came to me today and she did not know whether she was a King of Diamond or a Queen of Diamond, but I know my spread now is a King of Diamond and I have something very close to King of Diamond, I can say, okay, there is a possibility that this client is a King of Diamond. Okay, and you can start the reading from that point of view. Start the iteration at least. Start the rectification process at least from that point of view.
Just as a side note, I'm also running your birth card today, so I knew.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So those kind of those kind of coincidences will be there. Again, it depends on how good you can tune into those coincidences. Yeah, exactly. And
so
then,
should we move on to the examples?
yeah, sure. But maybe some other questions if you have in the meantime, something comes up, you can always interrupt and ask me. I think we covered most of the things I wanted to talk about.
Oh, I wanted to ask you, for instance, specifically, like for when somebody gives you a marriage date, like how do you see between like the day they met the person, the day they had the party, the day they signed the papers, or maybe?
Sure. It's a good question. Actually, this has happened also, that marriage is something very personal to a person, okay? And it depends from culture to culture. If you see Americans or Westerners in general, for them, the day of meeting their partner and, first time they have sex, for example, is more of a marriage than what it means to an Indian person who gets married through his cultural roots, okay? I have had clients from Romania itself who actually follow the ISKCON movement, okay? So this person, it's very interesting, that chart actually. Maybe later on this year when I'm teaching, I will show that chart. This person, not only she had one kind of a meeting where she met the husband and it was very important to her, and she also signed the papers, and it became a legal marriage. But this person also had the Agnihotra, which is the fire sacrifice event we do in India, like a Homa, that sort of a marriage also. So for her, in her chart, that event was looking more stronger because she was a Vaishnavite. She was following Vishnu Dharma and tradition. But when I was looking at her events of when she met her husband and also the time when she became official for them, it was not so exciting for them. It was the event that excited them was this official event that happened in India. Okay. And again, she's a Western person, still following Indian standards in that way. But when you really want to say, the meeting is D7, very clear on that. Marriage is D9. The transits, of course, will depend on the Dharakaraka, the planetary spouse, for example, Jupiter for woman, Venus for a man, those kind of things, and the D60 chart. You can definitely filter, but you have to be careful because, you asked me what is the biggest challenge in rectification. The biggest challenge is the planets themselves. I say that because you see, Sun in astrology can trigger anything because it's the natural Atmakaraka, okay? And now we are, say, for example, in my own chart, Sun actually has lined up in many events in my life, okay? And Sun is not even my Atmakaraka. So if I left the transit of Sun and, I did not have a prominent D60 lineup with the Sun, still the Sun can give an event. What I mean, for example, is let's say a relationship event. In the D60, my Sun doesn't rule any of the 9th or the 7th cusp, okay? But still, I've met women or, at these relationship meetings on the days when the Sun was triggered in my chart. So what does that mean? The Sun is a natural Atmakaraka. Just by himself, he's triggering so many events. And a client comes to you and he gives a lot of events to you, yet you see the Sun lighting up so many times, then you are actually in deep trouble that day, because you don't know whether the Sun is an important 7th cusp lord for them or the 9th cusp lord, or is he a natural Atmakaraka. That's one thing. Take the secondary way. You have other planets, the conscious planets. No, I'm not talking about the luminaries, the conscious planets ruling 2 signs each. So you don't know whether the 7th cusp can fall in, say, Jupiter in Pisces can activate the 7th cusp, or the 7th cusp falling in Sagittarius, Jupiter can activate the 7th cusp. So that's another danger. And especially in the D60, we're talking about 7th cusp either in sign of Sagittarius or sign of Pisces. If you put the 7th cusp in the sign of Pisces, the Lagna becomes Virgo. If you put the 7th cusp in the sign of Sagittarius, the Lagna becomes Gemini. So you see the confusion there, how it lines up. That's why we need many events. You want to see if the 4th cusp is lining up or the 9th cusp is lining up, etc. Okay. And you wanted to say something, or?
No, it's such a broad topic, like we could talk for a day.
Yeah, sure, you can do that. And same way, the moon, actually, the moon is like the queen in the zodiac and is so fast moving. And moon is very important planet for Kavedamsha, especially to trigger auspicious events or inauspicious events of life. You need the moon involved in big ways, okay? And if a person has Atmakaraka moon, what do you do now? You don't know whether the moon is triggering this event because he's the Atmakaraka, or he's triggering this event because he rules the fourth cusp in the D40 chart, or those sort of confusion. Now you see why Mercury becomes very important to filter this and take the definitive approach. Okay, I see this happening, I see that also happening. Now I want to know what is it really that is going on here. Okay. So yeah, that's a good question actually. That's a very good question to look into. And yeah, sure. You wanted to go into the examples, or?
Yes, so I'm just gonna say that this will be like the first half, like the theory half
Yes.
of our interview, and then we'll do the example part. So
Yes.
yeah, I'm gonna stop the recording here, and then I'll see you in a few seconds.
Sure. Yeah.
So guys, if you want to see Ganesh, see more of him, you can check out his website. What is your website?
It's called Vidya Vardi Jyotish. Yeah, it means
below in the link as well.
Yeah, it means sea of knowledge. It's an alternative name to me, Ganesha's alternative name. So you can find it there.
Yes, and to check out also the second part with the examples when we actually see what's being said here with visual aids. Okay, see you later.
See you.